So then, we are back with more understandings from the time of the second tabernacle services where we find the Aramaic English translation of the word. This translation comes from the original manuscripts of the prophets of the Tzayelic lineage, so then we can understand the time of the end. As per Yirmiyahu the prophet, we find layers of understanding of the spring feast, the autumn feast, and also the returning of the cities of the Messiah laid waste for many centuries. As we read then Yirmiyahu the prophet, let's then make the situation very clear as far as his prophecies and the projections he then made via the understanding of the Torah, and then showing us very precisely the Messiah would come. He would come from a virgin, and then he would establish his kingdom, and then later on he spoke of the autumn feast and then post-autumn feast. Can say that Yirmiyahu the prophet was probably the most complete prophet ever in the history of this planet. But then the Messiah then later when he came, obviously he was above them. The only situation is the documents it was then recorded regarding the Messiah, a lot of them were destroyed. But let's then, from another angle of the situation, let's evaluate then the Messiah as the top general of what's coming in the future. We do understand the Holy Instructions if you read it. Most often you find many generals involved with the Holy Instructions, and they were very aware of the presence of the Creator Himself. But what these then translate for us in a practical way as this transition then is taking place. For instance, the 11th chapter of Daniel, it is absolutely a military document. Sections of Galah or Revelation also is a military document. Sections of Ezekiel, Yirmiyahu, and Yirmiyahu, these are, many sections of them are military documents. Now, as far as speaking of a military, if you are never in the service, then it's not very easy for you to understand. But if you were in the service, you can understand easily. Now, the understanding is the Messiah came and he completed the spring feast. So the spring was completed. He was then for 72 hours in the inferno, and then he came back. When he did, then he started preparing his people for his 1,000 years in the earth. And to do this, the Messiah had to take them, in quote, by hand, step by step, because the nation of Israel was far away, and observing precisely what Moses told them to do and observe. But then the Messiah, he came and he taught them, step by step, season by season. And then when it came the time of the year of the autumn, then the Messiah, obviously, his time in the earth after he came from the dead was drawing to a near. And this moment was then very precious, because then the Messiah, while the land was prospering because of his presence during these 12 months, then at the end of it, he began to explain what's coming. And with them came the conditions of salvation. So then, in a situation of salvation, it's not only being entangled with laws and regulations. That's not the point. The point is the holy laws, they are in fact not complicated. So a person should never blame the Torah or the law for the lack of salvation. Neither a person should disregard the entire Torah and then thinking a person is saved. Then is worse yet. So the Torah is then the basis. A person can't have salvation without the Torah. So since the Torah is then the base, then what's coming next? No, the Messiah has said himself. As far as his side of the situation, he came and he precisely and perfectly completed the spring feast. And the Messiah knew that the autumn feast also must be completed, and then the Creator himself, through him, is going to execute the autumn feast. So the Messiah is responsible for both of them. But from the time the Messiah then taught his people, when he was then 12 months teaching them, and then the people began to be back on track. And the Messiah was then taken away. Later on, he was taken away, Takanot and Maasim, and then the inventions of the people of the law and traditions who had nothing to do with the holy instructions, as the Messiah was teaching them step by step, day by day, season by season, feast by feast. The Messiah was cleaning it up. No, don't do this, but do this. Don't do this way, but rather do this way. And every time he was pointing to do in a certain way, he was then backed by the Torah. So the Messiah was not only inventing things for himself, he was explaining the way these should be based from the basis, the Torah. So the Messiah went on, first month, second month, third month, fourth, fifth, 12 months. As he was doing this, every time the Messiah was explaining and directing and people they were obedient, instantly came prosperity. Instantly. You heard right. Instantly. If you think sometimes you consider yourself prosperous because you have to wait the whole year so then you can get a bit of more money from your workplace or whatsoever you get your money from. The people of the land, when they were on track of what they should be doing, they had prosperity instantly. Now these came in many ways, because the people were then in line with the holy instructions. Obviously then prosperity came as a result of it. So then the Messiah taught them, and the land was prospering. If you then read the holy instructions, as you can determine when he was speaking prior of his death on the stake versus after his death on the stake, and these are easily distinguishable. If you spend time on a word, if you do a research, if you study from the Israelic lineage, the Holy Hebrew manuscripts, the prophets, the writings, and you spend time in a word, you then understand. Then we make a link from the time of the Messiah when he completed the spring feast, and then we draw a line at the end of this age, or then the autumn feast. And you divide this time by half. What he's saying is this: it was 2,000 years then was spent, 1,000 years for the Messiah, 1,000 years for Nahashatan. As far as the importance of then coming back from the dead, and this truly is a very straightforward point. When Shaliach Shaul was explaining of this section, let's make sure we understand. When the Messiah said, "Go therefore and raise the dead," he was explaining of his own presence while he was with his people. There are miracles, but these miracles are not involved with bringing people from the dead. Try to understand the importance of this point. When the Messiah was completing the spring feast, he was pointing the people of Ruach HaKodesh in his life, and then explaining at a projected time in the future people would return from the dead in a resting status, from a resting status because of their obedience during this lifetime. But we should not be confused as far as understanding as a mystical point of people having some sort of a gift going around raising people from the dead. There was a specific reason why the Messiah then said for them, "Go therefore at this point in time and raise the dead." Because he was showing the people what's coming in the future. He was preparing them not only for the time where Ruach HaKodesh was coming, but also of the autumn feast in the future. From the time of Shaliach Shaul, there are lots of situations we should be very cautious the way we read, the way we understand, the way we interpret, because there are sections of then where Shaliach Shaul was involved with the people where there were rags or then handkerchiefs taken by Shaliach Shaul and placed on the sick and they were healed. It's absolutely not true. If you mix the work of the Shilishim or then the apostles with rags and pieces of cloth because they touched it and you touch somebody else, they get healed, that's mysticism. Similarly, you find Cornelius. Cornelius never saw an angel. I don't care if he was a general of his time or a centurion or any kind of a person. He was from the pagan army of Rome. He never, under any condition, saw any kind of an angel. So what was the situation? The wife of Lot was never a column of salt. Roman invention. Second, Cornelius never saw an angel. Roman invention, because they want to make him important because he was Roman. And then the Romans invented he saw an angel to make his name higher. And as we read from Acts, the 40 days of the Messiah was not when he came from the dead, it was his time of obedience in the desert, learning how to put the flesh under the control. Then you find the distinction from after he came from the dead versus prior. So when you take the time and you study and you research, you understand. So then, mysticism. Then there was the Messiah explaining what's coming in the future. Now, were people interested? No. People wanted prosperity. That's why the pagans and the Greco and the Romans invented many kinds of pagan rituals, and they mix with Hebraic culture, and they don't mix. As far as Christmas, it simply doesn't exist. It's a celebration made up on their own. The Greco and the Romans, they were not sure when the Messiah was born. Obviously, because they absolutely placed a date because it was convenient. They had already had the pagan celebrations on 25th. So they decided, place the whole celebration together, and so they went. But if you are searching for salvation, that's another situation. Now, you are not taking the time to study the instructions so then you can be religious, or then you can earn salvation on your own. You learn the truth because you are afraid of what's coming in the future. Let me say this to you. If you die without the knowledge of tabernacling, it is straight down. Now, some people can handle the truth more than others. There are certain types of lies where a person then becomes comfortable. Those people who are stronger, they can understand the truth, and from then on they make the proper changes. After the destruction of the holy city in Jerusalem, and then the temple was obviously gone by this time, and then the tomb was destroyed for the first time in 1009 by the Muslims, then life, or then the miltha and the directives of this world went outside. Thus the line of directive and the life thereof, a line of life directly related with the Creator Himself, is then given to this world contaminated. So people were granted even this, even people they don't deserve it. Yet they are granted with a certain liberties only for the point of making choices. Now, there are people, they relate to the choices, proper choices, because they are rich, because they have a house, because they have a family. It's got nothing to do with it. It has to do with understanding the instructions. Now, if you repudiate the instructions, then you are dead when you die. Do you understand this? Speaking of your soul is going to die. First you are going to torment for some time, and then at the end you are going to die in a soul level. What was then Shaliach Shaul explaining? He said at the end of this age, then explains later on that those souls who were then resting would come back. What we don't understand is the translator of the document did not link with Ezekiel. And do you know why? It's because people were familiar with it. Similarly, if you say then the number 4, you know that it's 2 plus 2. You understand it's 4. When you are saying what is the number then that you are speaking of as far as this calculation, you say 4. You don't have to say 2 plus 2, though you could. So as then when it was speaking of coming back from the dead, explaining of Ezekiel would be then 2 plus 2. Explaining directly was then 4. But in order for you to understand 4, you have to understand 2 plus 2. People then, they rejected the law, they rejected the instructions, and they want to understand revelation. Then they can understand revelation, they don't understand not even their own salvation. And they don't produce fruit. What is left is being a nice man, a nice woman, and then having a nice family, and being prosperous, and this translates salvation. But they are in line with traditions of the world. And it's precisely these the Messiah said it's going to get caught at the end because they are not prepared for what's coming. You want to prove of it? Let's read this from Luke. And as it was in the days of Noah, so likewise it will be in the days of the revelation, or then when the Son of Man shows himself. For they were eating and drinking and taking wives and giving them to husbands until the day that Noah entered the ark, and then the Vesuvius came and destroyed them. And again, as it was in the days of Lot, when they were eating and drinking and buying and having trade and planting, and they were building. But on the day that Lot went out of Sodom, then fire and brimstone came down from heaven and destroyed them. So then likewise, in the day of the revelation, is then likewise going to take place. So what is the Messiah saying? Find me a verse in the entire instructions where the Messiah was speaking of families. Now, if family is so important for some people, as they base their own salvation from the virtue of their own power of doing what they think is right, and they project what is right then as God for themselves. Find me a verse where the Messiah then speaks of families. He said at least once, the man should leave father and mother and join to his wife and become one flesh. This is a great mystery. However, the Messiah said, however, it is not the point. The point is not becoming then a world by itself and then rejecting the Torah. That's why those people, they were doing what was nice. They were eating and drinking and having families and having wives and so on and so forth. And when the time comes, they are caught unawares. Because they don't understand the principles. Now the Messiah said bearing fruit. We understand evil resides in the flesh. Every person in this planet has evil in the flesh. Some people, they don't want to be tested. They don't want to sense the evil in their flesh. They always try to deviate from the evil and try to be in line with the world by being a nice person, a responsible person, having a nice family, being responsible. This equals God. And the Messiah said, got nothing to do with it. Because they made idolatry out of these. But when we understand the Torah as the basis, and we begin reading these documents, we begin to understand, and then we have to force ourselves to understand, and then we have to force ourselves to understand. As you force yourself to understand, then in a gradual understanding you are placing your flesh under subjection. That's what the Messiah did when he was 40 days in the desert. Now, if you want a Savior based from your own understanding, he doesn't exist. What does exist is a lying spirit in a world where you are part of. Then Shaliach Shaul was explaining then at the end that then people are coming from the dead. Are people coming from the dead from this age? No. This age is done away with, is already, has its days counted. When the Messiah was then completing the spring feast, he said to his disciples, go over there and then raise the dead, because he was then making a point of what's coming then at the end. He was going to explain that this age then is going to end. And then by raising them from the dead, his other teaching was, when this age then ends, it's going to end with a shout of sulfur. And then it's going to be refurbished. And then comes the meal the Messiah is going to have with these people. Then each of them, those souls who were obedient, who went to rest, then it's coming back from the dead, from their resting places. When this earth is refurbished, so should then the Shilishim be concerned in bringing people from the dead? No. What the Messiah had to teach, he already did. And what we have are the records that the Messiah did give this order for this specific teaching, and then we read the prophets, and then we read the Torah. This is truly enough. If people, they think they go around the world then raising people from the dead, these people are crazy. They are not proving. They are dealing with witchcraft. They are dealing with the proving a situation that was already proved. But we should be instructing of what's coming then in the future during the time of the autumn feast and post-autumn feast when the people return from their resting places. The link with Shaliach Shaul explaining of those people coming from the dead is linked with Ezekiel. Now, if you don't understand the Torah, you don't understand the Moadim, you don't understand the holy feasts, you don't understand then the prophets, you don't understand Revelation, you can't produce fruit, you can instruct the others, you can direct the others. So what you are going to believe? Your own power of making right choices in your own eyes and making a God out of it. And the Messiah said precisely these, it's going to get them caught at the end. So the Torah is absolutely the basis. Liking it, don't liking it, remains the basis. Do you want to save your soul, or do you want to go to torment when you die? And as you search the holy instructions, and sometimes it's becoming very heavy, praise God for it. Then you begin to have a fight with your flesh, and you must win. When it becomes heavy, it's because the evil in your flesh is fighting against you. Now, if you don't pursue, if you don't make yourself a person victorious over your flesh, then your soul is lost. Thus, maintaining the path should always maintain the path. That's why it should be part of a synagogue. Great teachings, people that do say the truth, showing in the Torah and the prophets what we should be doing, what we are heading towards. So each person maintains the path for his or her own salvation of their own souls. Now the point is, if you are a person from the Hebrew lineage versus a person from a Gentile lineage, we must understand Revelation. Because if we don't understand Revelation, then a person is not saved. With the same tenacity, a Gentile understands the right of having a family and do properly and being responsible and have a great future and then prospering in life and making a God out of it. It's the same tenacity that the Hebrew person is towards the zealous way of taking care of the law, yet does not understand Revelation. The Messiah said himself, prostitutes and thieves are going to earn the kingdom before you, being religious. Because the Messiah was making a balance of them. And what was he doing? He was pointing both of them to what he was explaining of his completion of the spring feast and teachings of the autumn feast. Next time I'm going to evaluate more of Revelation and then make a link with Ezekiel and then also the teachings of Shaliach Shaul. And obviously at the end should have the understanding of what the Messiah was saying. Those who are Hebrews from the faith, they must know what the Messiah did, the timings he did, what he said, as per the instructions of Moses, because Moses said, when he comes, listen. And obviously, Revelation. In Hebrew, a believer must understand Revelation. So then they are revealed. It doesn't mean a Hebrew person is going to save you. It's not the point. Because as the Hebrew people, they reveal what it means, then it's up to us to study. So please stay tuned. Much more coming up.